This episode is dedicated to Andrew Campbell for becoming our newest Southpaw supporter and helping to make this project possible.
This is Sam.
This is Chef Joseph.
And this is Southpaw.
On this episode of Southpaw, we have Chef Joseph Fontelera, and I believe this is our first episode about food, so perhaps I should say this is our first Southslaw episode. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, no, I'm really, I'm like humbled that like someone wants to listen to me. Thank you for having me.
Could you tell our audience a bit about yourself, your background, and your restaurant?
So my name is Joseph Fontelera. I've been cooking for almost 20 years now, professionally. And recently I'm Filipino American. And I've recently decided to go into Filipino food. I spent most of my career doing contemporary American, fine dining, Japanese, from casual to like mid-tier to fine dining, and most of the career in fine dining, but only have recently decided to go into Filipino food. That's a very, very short synopsis of of my career, I guess.
How did you get interested in food?
Well, so growing up, we ate a lot of Filipino food at the house, but growing up in the United States, right, you're bombarded by media constantly of what you typically see like the white American family enjoying, right? And then you go to school and, if you don't go to school in, parts of the East Coast or like in the Bay Area, right? And you're Filipino, you're probably not going to see a lot of other people that look like you, right? So I went to school with, I was very fortunate to go to a very diverse school, but the culture there was still very overwhelmingly white. So it was just I'd bring my lunches. This is like the Asian American cliche story almost, right? You bring your lunch and people are like, "Ooh, what's that?" And then you see what everyone else is eating, and then you want to try. You want to understand what that's like, right? So that's I would say part of what like piqued my curiosity into like working with food. I wanted to be able to make these things that my parents did not have in the house. I was raised a lot by my grandmother, and she did a lot of cooking, and I like hanging out with my grandma, so I just kind of fell into helping her out in the kitchen and cooking that way.
When did you start paying attention to food, especially Filipino food?
I don't know. I feel like this is something that you kind of know in the back of your head growing up a Filipino person in the United States, right? Because although there are similarities to a lot of different Asian cuisines and some Polynesian food, Filipino food is very, very different from most things in the world, right? And despite being the second largest recorded Asian American group, ethnic group in the United States, there, at least when I was growing up, there's hardly any representation at all, right? So you have like all this stuff like from your family and your community, if you're lucky enough to have a Filipino American, community around you, you see all these things that look very, very different, taste different, smell different from like everything that you're bombarded by in your day-to-day life. So you just kind of know that like everything is different. Now in terms of like me like looking towards it, right? That took a very long time. Like I said, I spent most of my career doing other people's food. There's kind of like I don't know. There's kind of like a weird thing, right? Like when you do food, right? Like if a white guy were to go and open up like a Pan Asian restaurant of some sort, or even like a focused Asian restaurant, like specializing in one cuisine, like they're heralded as like this genius, right? But if like me, a Filipino person, let's say like when I started my career like 15, 16 years ago, right? If I were to open up a Filipino restaurant, it would just be looked down upon like, oh, this is lazy, this is poor food, whatever, right? Like, I don't know, that idea like has always been in the back of my head, and it just slowly grew. Throughout my career, like just getting shat on by I'm cursing a lot. Is that all right?
That's all right.
Okay, so I spent a lot of my career just getting shat on by my colleagues, whether they be white or even other people of color. Worst being like other Asians, just like Filipinos are dirty Asians, or we're cheap or whatever, right? And like I don't know, like our I think it took many years of like hearing that, and like I guess suppressing like how do I put this? Like you hear that from the media, you hear that from like the mainstream culture, you hear that from like your colleagues, and you spend so much time like learning other people's stuff, and then you see like the output from the other side. Like I've definitely seen plenty of like white chefs put out really mediocre Japanese food, and then they get like all this acclaim and all this praise for it, and it's objectively like not that good, and I'm like, why is all of this passing, and at the same time I'm like, why aren't people paying more attention to Filipino food, and then I found out the fact that there's like I said earlier, like we're the second largest Asian ethnic group in the United States, but nobody knows anything about this, right? And then 2020 hit, and everything just like really imploded for me, and I thought like, I'm in this really grueling, difficult career. I might as well really do something that is aligned with me, and all of 2020 was like a realignment process, trying to figure out like, how am I going to do Filipino food professionally? Like, why, like, do I really want to do this? Why do I want to do this? And like repeatedly answering those questions, and I think after a lot of time, reckoning, reflection, I came upon opening Booney Foods, and just it's my mission now, just champion Filipino culture and just be there and like be present at the table, when mainstream culture tells us that we don't belong, and then out of nowhere now there seems to be this explosion of Filipino food. And it's awesome, we still need more though.
Now, are different regions of the Philippines known for different foods?
Yeah. I feel like in the United States, mostly people know food from Luzon, which is where Manila is, the capital. But the food, even within Luzon, right, like is very different. Like my grandmother, she's from the north, and that food looks way different from like what you would typically find in Manila, and all of like the Filipino party foods that a lot of people associate with Filipino food, like kare, which is a oxtail peanut stew, or bringhe, a little bit less popular, but definitely pretty popular. That's like from the middle of Luzon, very rich food from Luzon. Like that's the food that everyone in the United States, I feel like kind of associates with Filipino food, but there's not a lot of awareness around Visayan food, which is like very, very seafood heavy, or food from Mindanao, which is very has a strong Muslim presence, and that food looks way different from anything else in the Philippines, and they use ingredients like coconuts that have been burned whole until they're basically ash and ground, and use that as a seasoning. I feel like I haven't encountered through like my experience or research like any other culture that does something like that.
What are staple ingredients for Filipino cooking?
I feel like despite having pre-colonization being made up of like very different tribes that all speak different languages, and are all independent of each other up until all of the after effects of colonization. The islands are still like they all share the same roughly the same like climate, and weather, and I feel like the main differences are really like in altitude. So like in like my grandmother's province, it's very harsh, and it's hard to have like the same kind of vegetation that you would have like near the swamps or near the seaside or any of that. But salt definitely. Of course, cooking you need salt, but salt is like very, very important in Filipino cooking. But it's never like it's it's complicated. It's not like a direct thing. You need salt to create all of like the fermentations that go into Filipino cooking. Every region has a different bagoong, which is a fermented seafood product or fish product. Example, where my grandmother's from, they're usually made of the bagoong there is made out of very small fish, versus like in the Visayas and southern Luzon, it's made out of shellfish, typically salted. So salted, water animal product of some sort. That's a staple that's in your house. Fish sauce, which again is a fermented water animal product. Slightly different use than bagoong. That's key. Vinegar is very, very key in Filipino food. Soy sauce, and definitely ginger, onion, and garlic. I would say those are the things that are in every Filipino pantry. And also, despite the food not being very spicy in most parts of the country, chilies are everywhere.
So how did you go about beginning to think about Filipino food as more than just yummy food that you grew up with, but as far as its history and politics?
I think the first thing was just, 2020 pandemic, and like the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes like were happening, and like I don't know, you feel this like target on you, right? And like we get like all Asian Americans are getting like lumped in together into this one category, like we're one, where there's nothing different between us. And like that was like the first thing I feel like that like really like pissed me off and sent me on like this kind of journey, right? And that kind of went hand in hand with like how come, again, like there's so many Filipino people here in the United States, and how come like there's no differentiation, and so I don't know, like all this frustration with everything that's happening in the pandemic. That's like the first thing that got me, because sorry, I haven't talked about this in a really long time, so I'm like stretching, the back of my brain here. I got furloughed from my job like right in the beginning of the pandemic, and in that time, I was just making lots of like Asian recipes across the board that I knew how to make, and I was like, just trying to like uplift like the small section of like the Asian community that's like paying attention to me on the internet in that time, just because it felt bad watching the news and seeing like the horrible things happening to our communities. And then when I got into Filipino recipes, I saw that there was this like big interest, from different folks, whether they're Filipino or not, and then that gave me a lot of encouragement. And then it got me to like rethinking, like, how come I haven't spent all the time, effort, and energy into learning about, my own culture, right? And so that got me onto asking all of my relatives, like confirming things like that I've read on the internet and like in books, trying to confirm that with like my relatives to make sure like how accurate that is, asking my grandma questions. So that's kind of how that happened. And then just lots of practice, lots of reading, and trying to recreate the things that, that I ate at all the various parties and in my home and all that stuff. Because, again, for a long time, I didn't cook any Filipino food. And it was kind of fun.
A note to our loyal listeners: if you love the Southpaw Project, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by financially supporting us on Patreon. This will give you access to exclusive bonus content, as well as our private chat group on Discord. Show your Southpaw solidarity by supporting us at patreon.com/southpawpod.
Now, how has colonialism and decolonial struggles impacted Filipino food?
It's the mark of like international influence is you can't avoid it in Filipino cuisine at all, whether it's Chinese influence or European influence or even like influence from South Asia. It's everywhere, and similar to like tempura or like tonkatsu or something in Japan, right? There's like a indigenization of like a lot of stuff. So like you'll see that show up with a lot of our recipes, our use of like pork in everything. That's the heavy usage of pork definitely came from Spain. And then there's like theories too that pork was heavily encouraged because it helped displace the Muslim population. Prior to Spain, the Philippines was a predominantly Muslim country. Still more research needs to be done around there, but that's definitely a thing. There's sisig. Sisig is a very, very popular dish in Filipino food, and that's definitely like a product of colonial shit. American soldiers were just throwing out pig heads and intestines, and then the people near where that was happening, which was in the Pampanga region, people were saving the pig heads and then doing a thing. Well, going through the process of making sisig, which originally was a vegan dish. That. And sisig in Kapampangan, which is the language spoken in that region, means to eat something sour. So it was originally soured vegetables that were grilled and then tossed into a salad, but then it turned into pig head that has been stewed, chopped up, and then marinated in citrus and then grilled and then cooked in its own braid. It's really good.
I think something like even Spam. I know for Korea and I believe also Hawaii, it was like this cheap food that was brought over by GIs, and then because of the poverty of war and colonization, is something like a lot of countries in the global South ended up making a part of their diet.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Spam is huge in the Philippines too. It's one of the more popular options. In the Philippines, there are places called silogans, which means a restaurant that serves silog. Silog being a portmanteau of the Tagalog word for garlic fried rice and an egg. So you could order whatever kind of silog you want. The most traditional one is tap silog. That's kind of the one that put it on these kinds of restaurants like on the radar, being a portmanteau of beef tapa, sinangag, garlic fried rice, itlog, egg, tap silog, right? And you could go to any of these restaurants and typically you could order a spam silog. It's super popular.
And then have you noticed there's some dishes that are getting popular now because it's Filipinos trying to reconnect with their culture?
Oh, yeah. So there's a chef. Her name is Yana Gilbuena, and she runs actually, I don't know if her pop-up is still going on, but she was pushing for a lot of vegan dishes in the Philippines because, before Spain came along and like really pushed us to be eating a lot of pork. Most of the food was pescatarian or vegetarian, just because animals were work animals, and like chickens provide eggs, and it's much more worth it to you to have a sustainable practice of like collecting eggs than killing the chicken, right? That's only a special occasion kind of thing. And then like from her work, a lot of other restaurants, and I'm seeing this a lot in the West Coast, are popping up that are like vegan only Filipino food. And they're kind of using the same techniques that, we grew up with, but applied to vegetables, and even like further, like applied to native vegetables. I think that's really cool. That's a new thing that I'm seeing happening.
Now let's go over the top 10 Filipino dishes that you think people ought to know. So number 1, adobo.
Yeah. So adobo is like the national dish of the Philippines is adobo. And it's weird. It's a Spanish word, right? But it's the national dish of our people, and it's only because Spaniards came over and saw what the native people were doing. They're like, oh, that looks a little bit similar to a thing we do in Spain. It's not at all the same, but whatever, I guess. Adobo typically means a dish cooked with soy sauce, vinegar, black peppercorn, bay leaf, and garlic. And it sounds simple, but let me tell you, I've been working on my adobo recipe for probably 10 years, and I've only now gotten to the point where I'm satisfied with it. And there's like anything, right? There's a million ways to do it. Like we discussed, kimchi by the sea is going to have fish, and in the mountain it's not, right? In parts of the Philippines, some places have a more soupy adobo with like lots of stewing liquid. Some places, like where my grandmother's from, is known to have a very dry adobo with like a thick layer of oil or grease on top. Ooh, that's actually my preferred way. And then there are places that the reach of Chinese trade didn't hit the native people so much, so they don't use soy sauce at all. But yeah, no, this really, really simple, limited ingredient dish, super delicious, and it takes a lot of practice to be able to actually pull off a really good product. But it's similar to like pizza, where bad pizza isn't really that bad. A bad adobo typically is never even really that bad either. So I do like that about it.
Number 2, Dinaguan.
Yeah, so Dinaguan, to me, that's like adobo's shadow. Dinaguan is, for whatever reason, there's a lot of shame around it, and I blame colonization and white supremacy on that. But they eat a lot of blood products in Spain, so I'm blaming this one totally on U.S. colonization. But it's a stew made very similarly to adobo, but instead of soy sauce, the fifth flavoring ingredient is the blood of the animal that you're cooking. A lot of places will do it with pork. I think that is the overwhelmingly popular one. And then places where the Philippines was Muslim, I think they use goat and beef. Now, I believe you can't consume blood in Muslim, like in halal tradition. But the folks that were in those regions that weren't Muslim were still doing using this technique to cook their food. It's really good, really tasty, really rich, very, very, very rich, and probably not so good for your heart health, but good for your soul.
Yeah, the first time I had it, I really liked it because it reminded me a lot of a Korean dish called sundae.
Oh God, I love sundae. Yeah, I think I said the same thing, but inverse when I had sundae.
Yeah, it's not one for one the same, but it has like a similar vibe, let's say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Pig's blood is delicious. Typically, like food in the Philippines is eaten with rice, but Dinaguan is eaten with a sweet rice cake. And then I've seen, kind of like how sundae is made, right? Sometimes you have the noodles in there, but sometimes you have like the very, very short grain sweet rice, and that's where I think it's like a kind of like an analog for each other there.
Number 3, silog.
So silog is that's breakfast, and I don't like when the star is the garlic fried rice and the nicely cooked egg, which by like French standards would be like an overcooked sunny side egg, because the outsides are frilly and crispy, but the inside is still the middle is still very gooey and runny. Oh God, I don't know. I love it. I feel like I can't talk coherently when I talk about garlic fried rice. I mean, I opened up a restaurant that primarily serves different versions of silog, but it could be anything. I grew up eating like hot dog silog, or like we were talking about earlier, spam silog. Just you got to make a really good buttery, garlicky fried rice with just the right amount of salt, garlic, and butter in there, and then a good egg to mix up with the protein. Oh, very good. But that's only part of it, right? Like you need something else there. whether that be a hot dog or like beef tapa, the famous one, tapsilog, or my favorite, long silog, which is longanisa, the Filipino sausage.
All right, number 4, ginatan.
So there's ginatan and ginataan, and that means coconut milk has been put in it. And I feel like this is like, my mom says ginatan is how you say the finished product, and other people are telling me no, it's ginataan. Extra emphasis on the second A. I don't know, whatever. Both are acceptable, but that's coconut milk stewed stuff, and that could be anything. Typically, it's seafood, shrimp and vegetables and squash. It's a really like a classic party dish. That's not something typically eaten every day unless you live in coconut country, which is recently just got hit by the typhoon real bad. But that's where most coconut production is in the Philippines, where they'll eat ginatan everything like all day long. But for everyone else, it's more of a special occasion kind of thing. But yeah, if I had to describe it, it's like buttery, rich, sweet coconut sauce, and I don't know. It's again, like, this is the thing I love about Filipino food, and I feel like you could apply my following statement to everything. It's very simple, but everything is like very unique and delicious. So it's very vague and kind of, I feel like, lame descriptor, but I don't know how else to say it.
So it simply means cooked in coconut milk. Can you tell us then the significance of the coconut tree?
Oh yeah, so the coconut tree is it's the tree of life for most of the tribes in the Philippines. Aside from high up in the mountains where coconuts don't really grow so well, every creation myth that I've come across involves a coconut tree. Coconut oil is used to cook the food. Coconut milk is used to enrich stews, make dessert, make savory things. Coconut husks are used to polish and clean your house. Coconut meat is used for a variety of things. Coconut, savory or sweet dishes. Fibers from the coconut are used, for building material. It's a fruit. It's a tree that provides a lot for basically every tribe region in the Philippines. And actually, there's a liquor called tuba. It's a fermented thing that I don't really know too much about, so I don't want to speak out of my ass here. But I believe it's made from the sap of the coconut tree. And actually that method made its way to Mexico, and they make tuba not too far from the birthplace of tequila. So there's some research being done to see if who came first and if tequila came from tuba.
Number 5, sigsig. This is one of my favorite dishes, not just in Filipino food, but just in the world, especially the version that you mentioned where it comes from the pig's ear.
Oh, yeah. No, the best sisig uses the whole head. You have the richness from the cheeks, and then you have the crisp of the skin, and then you have that extra crispy from the ears. Oh, so good. But yeah, no, sisig's great. People from Pampanga, which is just north of the capital, just south of where my grandmother's from, smack dab in the middle of Luzon, they've been eating sisig forever. But it only came to popularity abroad here in the States, I believe in the mid 90s. I don't know why I haven't been able to do more research on that, but in either case, yeah, no, sisig's great. It's so it's thrice cooked pig. You typically take the pig's head, and then you boil it in a mixture of pineapple juice and then all the adobo ingredients, the soy sauce, black pepper, garlic, bay leaf, vinegar, right, to tenderize it. And then after that, the pig gets grilled, and you have the crisp skin all around. And then you harvest the meat, the eyes, and the brain, right? And then you chop up the meat real fine, and then mix it with onions, garlic, and lots of chilies. And that's unique to Luzon food, because Luzon doesn't typically use a lot of chilies in their cooking. So I think that's another thing that makes sisig kind of stand out and pop. And then, so yeah, you take all that finely chopped meat, marinate it in calamansi, the Philippine citrus, right? And then you cook it again usually on a sizzling platter or in a wok. And then you hit it with the brains that you took out of the skull, and that makes it like bind together in this nice, rich salad, if you will. Just, to save our hearts, I'll call it a salad.
If you love the Southpaw project, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by financially supporting us on Patreon. It'll help us supplement the cost of running this project, the incredible time and energy we put into it 7 days a week, and you'll be giving us some breathing room, not only to juggle Southpaw with our day jobs, but also to expand Southpaw into other areas. Show your Southpaw solidarity by supporting us at patreon.com/southpawpod.
Number 6, Filipino barbecue. And can you also tell us about the vinegar dip and what that's supposed to do? Because whenever I think of Filipino barbecue, I also think about that.
Hey, now that you mentioned the vinegar dip, I feel like we have to expand upon this a little bit. So like I was saying, Filipino food typically isn't very spicy. There's only a couple of regions that have spicy food, but everyone else, for the most part, the food is very well-balanced and leans on like the saltier or like sweet side. And then, but everyone has chilies in their pantry. That's where the spice comes in, is the vinegar dipping sauce. And I feel like that's like key, like very, very key to Filipino cooking and like the Filipino table. It's not, dare I say, authentic if you don't have sausawan, which means dip, at the table. And that's how people customize to their level of spice. You can dip as much or as little as you want in the vinegar dipping sauce. And then, it's typically the local vinegar, and, lots of onion, lots of garlic, and a lot of chili. Now, Filipino barbecue, that's kind of a new-ish thing. I mean, we've been cooking food over, open fire for a long time, but like the sticks in that like sweet, sticky red sauce, that actually came from American presence. And there's a huge demand for ketchup in the Philippines at this, around when the U.S. was, occupying, and not enough tomato. So there's a woman, her name was Maria Orosa. She was among many, many things, because she did a lot for the country when she was alive. She was also a food scientist, and because of this like huge demand for ketchup, she was trying to figure out like, okay, there's not enough tomatoes in the Philippines to be able to support ketchup production. What can we do? And she, the Philippines is very plentiful with bananas, so she developed the original recipe for banana ketchup.
I love banana ketchup mixed with Worcestershire sauce.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
I guess it's a regional thing to LA. There's a couple of Filipino restaurants where they make this great fried chicken dish, and then they give it to you with that sauce.
That's a good idea. I mean, because Filipino barbecue, I was going to get into like is, they're trying to create a copy of like American barbecue where you use ketchup and various seasonings, right? And so a lot of Filipino barbecue recipes will use banana ketchup and fish sauce. And fish sauce is, the progenitor of Worcestershire sauce, so yeah. Wow, that's real interesting.
Because it almost adds also that vinegar taste to it, but it's like not as strong and, has like a smoky flavor to it.
Yeah, dude, that's a good idea. I'm gonna mess with that a little bit.
All right, that number 7, lechon.
Oh yeah, man. I feel like no feast, no special occasion is complete without a lechon, of some sort. Whether it's what's getting popular now, the Cebu lechon, which is a rolled pork belly stuffed with the traditional lechon spices, or a whole pig. That's the showstopper right there. I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like I have like a conflicted relationship with lechon now, because I think about why pork consumption became so popular in the Philippines, when prior to Spain it wasn't as integral to the cuisine and the culture. But at the same time, God, I really love roast pig.
It's like friends I know who are Jewish or Muslim, and they say like, "Oh, I shouldn't be eating pork," but once I had it, it's like I can't. I have to eat it.
It's so good. And the thing I really appreciate about it, especially here in the Midwest, like there's definitely like the warm and fuzzies are created by a lechon. Like typically if you're going to have a pig, you need a lot of people to eat it, right? So you're gathering like all of like friends, family, extended family, everyone and their mother, like to the party. And that part is really cool. But as a person like making it too, you typically, it's going to take you, up to like 16 hours, depending on how big this pig is, and like the entire preparation making that. And you have to have at least a couple of people helping you. And like, there's the bonding there too. And then, like I mentioned, like, here in the Midwest, there's a fair amount of Filipino people, especially in the Chicagoland area, where I'm based out of. But it's not like LA where there's like historic Filipino town, or like in San Francisco where in Daly City, there's Filipino people everywhere. Like, no, like you get people coming out of the woodwork to get together to produce this pig, and then even more people to come together and eat the pig, and I think that's really special.
Number 8, Filipino spaghetti.
Oh God, yeah, this is the take it or leave it dish. And shout out to Nicole Ponseca of Jeepney fame for like publicly saying that, because I grew up not really liking Filipino spaghetti. Now I love it. It's spaghetti noodles cooked with, or served with rather, a banana ketchup and hot dog sauce and cheddar cheese on top. And I grew up not liking this dish, but as I left my home and started eating more Midwestern food, which is like very stick to your ribs like stuff, like goulash in Michigan, right? It looks nothing like Hungarian goulash. Goulash in Michigan is macaroni, elbow macaroni and chili and cheddar on top, and I developed a taste for that, and then I like thought about it, like, this is just Filipino spaghetti. And then I tried it when Jollibee first opened up here in Chicago, again, after not having had it for like many decades, and I'm like, ooh, this is delicious. I love this. Yeah, so whether that sounds like your jam or not, I encourage you to like try it at least once to understand this weird like conflicting part of Filipino American or just Filipino culture in general.
Number 9, halo halo.
Oh yeah, halo halo is the more I find out about this dish, the more like conflict I have with it, because it's Japanese in origin. Or at least that's what a lot of research says. I don't know. I guess I'm still in denial. But kakigori, that is the Japanese shave ice, which I believe also patbingsu.
Yeah, people who like that, like patbingsu, like halo halo.
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. It's shave ice and stuff. But I think what makes halo halo different is that it's typically a smaller format. And it's meant to be shared between, either it's a personal serving or it's shared between one other person, unlike, a big mound of ice in a kakigori that you share with like your entire family, or like a patbingsu that you share with like a whole table. And it's a lot more liquidy and a lot more dairy in there, less emphasis on ice cream, more emphasis on like evaporated milk, condensed milk, beans, various types of like jellies and stuff, and like local fruit thrown in there, and flan. It's so good. It's like someone just like woke up one day and was like, what are all my favorite things to eat, and let's just put it on top of shaved ice. Like flan on top of shaved ice. That seems like an excess to me, but it's so good.
Number 10, kakanin.
A catch-all word for sweets made out of rice. And every region has their own like different spins on it and uses different herbs to flavor the rice because no matter how fragrant the rice is, right, it's still kind of a neutral flavor. But yeah, no, I don't know. There's just something I feel like really special to that texture, and I feel like I don't know, like just I found that like white people have a big problem with like sticky rice texture. I don't know why. It's delicious, and I feel like that like chewy QQ as it's called in Chinese. I feel like I don't know why I don't even speak Chinese, and I feel like that's like the best descriptor. That like QQ texture appears in like everyone's food. So I'm meandering quite a bit here, but I don't know. Yeah, every region has like their own different thing, and it's so good. And I feel like the rice, like I don't know if the rice is a vessel for the sugar or the sugar is a vessel for the rice. But it's real tasty, And my favorites include biko, which is one of the more simpler preparations, where you just take sticky rice and cook it with brown sugar and coconut milk, and then you have a reserved coconut milk that you cook down until it's just coconut curds and coconut oil. And so you use those crispy curds and top your biko with that. That's really nice. You have the chew, you have the caramelly sugar from the dark brown sugar, and then the crunch from the curds. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, God. Now I'm just hungry because I'm talking and thinking about this stuff.
When would you normally have that? Would you have it at the end of a meal?
So desserts are kind of a strange concept, I think, traditionally in Filipino food, of course, getting traction now because of like international tastes and preferences, I guess. But like typically you would have that as your snack, your merienda, like in the middle of the day with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or something, or at the end of, or yeah, like it's presented like at the end of the party, like well after everyone has like finished eating and is just looking for little snacks. I feel like Kakanin is very very like I don't want to say hard on the palate, but it is very it is very intense. These things are typically very sweet, so it's hard to follow up a very rich meal with something also equally like very rich and sweet.
This was great. I think decolonization when it comes to food is about not being embarrassed or ashamed of your food, but to be proud of it and to know why you eat what you eat. Sometimes, even when someone thinks they're proud, they only want to admit to eating those foods that are white approved, but want nothing of the foods they think white Americans stigmatize. That still affects your view of your history and culture. It's also placing U.S. whiteness as the default, as the norm, and yourself and your community as the other, the weirdos. Also, a lot of these same ingredients you'll find in fancy Euro restaurants, as you know. So that means part of the stigma is not just based on race, but also on class, which you spoke to, Chef. Decolonization, as far as food goes, it's about embracing food as love and love as service and food as nurture. I think a lot of times we think of love having to be shown in these ways that we see on mainstream American television. It has to look like that. And then we don't look at obvious examples like food or the service that our family does for us or the way they nurture us and make sure we're fed. So we also have to think about that as well. We have to take off like that lens that we learn living in the US and think about it from the context of where we're from. However, you also don't want to reduce your culture just down to food, but recognize food as a byproduct of the conditions that made up your culture. As you mentioned, most of the Philippines lived under a lot of the same conditions, altitude being one of the varying factors, right? So this is why understanding dialectical materialism is so key to internal decolonization, but even more so to decolonial material struggles when it comes to land and independence. With all that said, thank you, Chef, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's I feel really like humbled and honored that you invited me. Thank you.
Where can people find you?
So find me at Booney Foods. We're inside of Revival Food Hall in downtown Chicago. You could also please give our Instagram a follow. It's Booney Foods, BOONIE Foods, all one word on Instagram, where you can you see all of the food. I really hate the term food porn, but I guess I don't know. I really fucking hate that. See all the lovely pictures and see all the lovely pictures of the food that we described today. There we go. Yeah, that's good.
And I'll put a link to all that in the show notes.
Now that's the show. If you enjoyed this episode and find this type of independent media worthwhile, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. We have a lot more episodes like this one in the works, but need your financial support to keep the show running. Even a few dollars a month goes a long way. No one does what we do, and it's all being funded by you, the listener. In return for supporting us, you'll gain access to lots of bonus content along with our private Discord chat. Even if you can't support us, there's a lot of free bonus content there as well. We also have an online store if you want to show your Southpaw solidarity by wearing our swag. You can find all pertinent links at southpawpod.com. And if you can't afford to support the show and still want to help, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. This makes it easier for others to find us. And don't forget to share your favorite episodes or the podcast itself on social media. Tell your friends. Until next time, goodbye.
Southpaw. Hitting with the left. Southpaw. Sam. Paul. Southpaw. Southpaw.